We're good to go. Hello, everybody. Okay, so we are recording. Hello, everybody. This is Jeanne-Marie Panel calling in live from Curacao. So yes, Simone was saying this is part of the Dutch kingdom, and they do speak a lot of Dutch here, and Papamento, which is the local dialect. But I'm here for the first Montessori show of 2019. And hello, Simone. It is good to see you. It is good to have you here. And I want to know about your new year and how everything is going.
Well, it's lovely to see you as well, Jean-Marie. Your classroom is looking very beautiful that you've been helping to set up. Very, very nice. And we had a very slow, cozy Christmas at home, which was delightful. It was, I finally mastered the art of going slow, where we really didn't feel like we had to do a lot, and we really enjoyed it. So that was lovely. And now we're back to classes. I run the classes at Jacaranda Tree Montessori for those of people who don't know me, as well as running the blog for the Montessori Notebook. And my classes are parent-children classes with mostly toddlers, but also some babies and preschoolers. So lots of fun, back to see all the families, and they just grew a lot over the holidays. So, So tell us about Curacao. They opened?
So Curacao, the Montessori School of Curacao, so the first full-fledged Montessori school on the island, opened its door on an anniversary date, which was January 6th, which was the 112th anniversary of the first Casa dei Bambini. So it was a pretty beautiful historical day. We had a little ribbon cutting ceremony, and they've started. So there's few children, and this is, starting in the middle of the year. They're calling this a pilot program. So they've only started with the primary classroom that I'm actually sitting in today, but they will be offering a toddler through 18 years of age. So their vision is to really bring Montessori to the island to, do a full-fledged from beginning to university studies. They actually have a big piece of land that they will be building the adolescent program on. So it's very exciting to be part of this project for sure.
And thank you to all of you as well for joining us on the call. You feel free to drop questions into the chat box. You can see that at the bottom of your screen. And with Zoom, we can even get you live on the call if you want to ask in person, which is lovely as well. So, Jean-Marie, I did get a bunch of questions come through before the show started. So that might be a nice place to start. And then once we run out of questions, we also can get on to how you live Montessori. To give a quick background, I guess, is when we set the topic, it was kind of like, there's so many parts of Montessori. So what does it really mean to live Montessori in your daily life? And how Jean-Marie and I still practice Montessori, even though our children are much older. It's basically just become a way of life for us, don't you think?
Yes, completely. It is a way of life. It is a way for me of understanding human development. It is a way of understanding what every little human being needs, depending on their age, and really preparing the environment for them and such. But before we get started, I'm actually very intrigued, Simone, with how, as Montessori guides, we are trained, we have a background and everything. But I know for me, I am in perpetual learning mode, and I'm all in a perpetual kind of wanting to bring new tools to my toolbox and everything. And I know that you posted recently that you were doing a course on the spiritual preparation of the adult. And I'm just kind of intrigued how that is going. And if you could maybe explain to those watching, what do we mean when we talk about the spiritual preparation of the adult when we talk in Montessori terms?
Well, it's a super fun course that's being offered by Pamela and Andy via Trillium Montessori, and it's almost like an advanced level of our Montessori training and a refresher for those of us who it's been a while since we did our training. So I did my training in 2004 back in Australia, and so it's really lovely to revisit topics. Dr. Montessori talks about preparation of the adult a lot, because to be a child's guide, we need to often understand ourselves and know ourselves very well, what triggers us and what that could often healing those wounds. If you've read any of Dr. Shafali's work, She also talks about to be a conscious parent, you have to often address the things that came up for you as a child so that you can then act. And this was exactly what Dr. Montessori was saying as well. It can be as much as looking after ourselves, so the self-care aspects of, you know, how you actually take care of yourself so that you can be refreshed and available to your child. And then the spiritual development of the child is often a lot of self-examination and what you're bringing into the classroom. So it's only just begun this week, and the first week was all about observation, which is a Montessori teacher's, you know, main tool, because we're not coming with some preconceived idea of what a child needs to learn, but looking at every child fresh every day, to see what we can offer and how we can guide them and to, yeah, help them develop to their best. So I don't have that much to add at the moment because it's still very fresh. We're just getting started, but it was really beautiful to hear a lecture by Andy that talks about observation. It gets really deep, and I think for most of the parents on the call it would be beyond what they need to understand, except that there's things like when you're observing, you're actually also affecting what you observe, and there's some really beautiful things that you have to contemplate and reflect on. And then we do simple observation exercises, like, which a parent could also try, observing a plant for 20 minutes and seeing what comes up for you. So you have a column on the right hand side about your thoughts and the subjective things that come up while you're observing the plant. And our observation practice is always objective, so you're looking at the plant and describing it, and then even wondering, like, can I say leaf, or is that also a subjective term? This is just a name we put on things, so it can get pretty meta.
Yeah,
and that's what Montessori teachers like talking about.
Mm-hmm. And that's beautiful, because, you know, you're talking in terms of being in the classroom with the children, but to me this is applicable to the parents. Like I talk a lot about just simple observation, even at home, like to train yourself to be that scientific observer that Montessori talked about. And yes, and I'm glad you brought up Dr. Shefali's work, because I've actually had the opportunity to speak with her about that, of how Montessori talks so much about the spiritual preparation of the adult, and how, you know, the work that she's doing is such a mirror of exactly that. So beautiful. Beautiful. Perfect. So do you want to get into all these lovely questions that we received? Okay.
The first one is from Ruth, and she says, how do I motivate kids to get ready in the morning after a holiday period? I mean, we only have a limited amount of time to get ready and out of the house. At the moment, we're doing things like putting on socks and shoes with our 4-year-old, as otherwise it will take too long. And we do allow enough time to get ready in the morning, but of course he prefers to play rather than getting dressed. So this is one that comes up a lot in terms of my child's struggling to get ready. But it is a good point, because after these lovely slow holidays, I know myself, I was like, the first week, it was definitely an adjustment period, going, oh, I need to be somewhere by a certain time. And one day I even opened the fridge of my class and went, there's no oranges in there. How are we going to make orange juice? Running to the shop where normally this is just an automatic question as I'm cycling to work, do I need to pick anything up on my way? So we get out of our habits. So I guess that's also the first thing to note, is it's very normal for there to be a time period where you're getting back into the routine.
Yeah, and imagine how I'm going to have to get back in the routine. I have been here in Curacao since the start of November, completely on my own little agenda, waking up when I want to. All of this is like, it's going to be brutal getting back into the family life. But so to answer that question for me, and we've done, like you say, this is a question that comes up often, and I think there's a whole episode on routines that would be good. But for me here, it's very simple. It is about having a conversation, all of those involved in getting out the door in the morning, to really be able to, and I apologize, but I need to mute people as they come in. So if you could be mindful to mute yourself when you join the call, so we don't have any background noise. Okay, so yes, routines. And this is something that we do together. It's really coming up together with the children, you know, maybe on the weekend when you're all together and saying, you know what, I've noticed that we're having kind of a hard time getting out all together with a smile on our face and ready to have a beautiful day. let's figure out all of the things that we need to do so that we can be out the door. And so there you really kind of, with them, you brainstorm on all the things that they need to do, you need to do, everybody needs to do. And there you can either create a visual routine chart, you can just write it down. I like the visual because it helps our younger children to understand. And then it's really about just reminding them that it's the routine chart that becomes in charge, where you don't have to remind and nag and all of that. So that's, for me, that's a beautiful tool that I've actually used myself in my home. I've, shared it with a lot of the families that I work with, and it works wonders because it really empowers them to have that control. And especially if they've helped create it, then they're part of the solution. And then the other thing is for you to be thinking about, what can I prepare the night before as well? Or what can I prepare with my child the night before so that it can go a little smoother? And sometimes it might actually mean, for a few weeks that you need to get up just a little bit earlier so that you feel more relaxed, you're fully prepared, and you can be more present with the children as they're going through the routine and remembering what they need to do. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, and I also like to do it exactly the same every day. So I wouldn't even try and get into the living room where there's toys. I would wake up, have some cuddles, and then maybe get dressed before I even leave that room, so I don't have to come back and, moving them around. So just showing them that it's the same every day, particularly with younger children. The age of the child is 4 years old. And so this is also a very interesting age, because that they can get them dressed themselves, but maybe they're resistant. And they're making it your problem because you're all the one that's trying to fix it, put on their shoes so you can leave. So sometimes it's also looking at, okay, when you're having this conversation with them at a neutral time, I'm noticing that I'm getting stressed and it's making me late for work. So I would love to help you, but there also might be a time when we just have to grab your shoes and walk out the door and you won't have your shoes on. Yes. And, recognize that they're making it your problem. And so whenever I feel triggered, I know that they've made it my problem. And I have to think about, how can I support them but not take it on to fix it for them. You're really having a hard time getting dressed. Oh, well, let me know if you want to get your shoes on. Okay, I'm standing at the door now. I'm ready to leave. Are you ready to leave? But really just showing that you're guiding them, but you're also not taking over and trying to fix it.
Right, and you're also giving them a choice of because sometimes when you know that a child knows how to do something and you've observed it and that they can be very successful, and one day they don't want to do it or they say they can't. To me, that's also, just asking for connection. I mean, it's not like they're giving up. It's kind of, like you and I, when, we know how to cook dinner every night. Do we want to every night? Maybe not. Sometimes we need extra help. So understanding that, and they're giving a choice of, would you like my help, or can you do it alone? Or do you want to take your shoes and, we'll put them on in the car, or whatever the options might be. But again, that whole choice that we give our young children.
It's also really interesting when people are leaving our classroom. Often the children just get really busy as they like, oh, I've got to do one more activity, I have to leave. And the parents are trying to, lure them out with different things. And then I often just say to the parents, oh, it's okay. You're welcome to go and start putting your shoes on. And as soon as they finish that activity, they'll come and join them. And then I'll say to the child, did you hear? Mama's going to go and put her shoes on. And really, I'd say probably 9 times out of 10, they really just go and find their parent when they're finished. So that's also something to keep in mind. But that grace period, maybe, or acknowledging it on the last day of the school holidays, this is going to be difficult. How can we set ourselves up for success, would be good to acknowledge.
Right, okay. Right. Wonderful.
So Ines has said, this is also similar but different. We notice that our 2.5-year-old often gets frustrated easily and then starts crying and whining and asking for help. It's almost as if he's rebelling against some of the Montessori principles we try doing at home. For example, when he does a puzzle and gets stuck with a piece, or when he works with magna blocks and something collapses, he cries and then immediately says, Mama, help. I try to encourage him by either demonstrating it or by verbally giving suggestions. And the same goes to putting on undies, shoes, even though he can pull them up. He immediately asks for help. How do I deal with this in the best way? It's almost as if he doesn't want to become more independent. I feel like if I push him too hard, I'm not following him, the child. If I give in every time, I end up doing everything for him. So this, I think that's a really interesting dynamic, because I recognize that with, that you can get into that pattern very easily. Do you have any suggestions? There's a second part to the question, but we can do that separately.
Well, to me, it goes back to that first question. Is sometimes, it's just also a need for connection, that that they're doing something. In this, I would just use storytelling or sometimes even humor of, oh, that's silly, I've seen you put on your shoes before. Do you want to put one on and I put the other one on? Or like, it sounds like Ines is maybe taking it a little personally as well, like that it's as if she's judging what she's wanting to give her child. And for me, it's just a form of communication sometimes. So again, it's about choices and just saying, I trust that you can do it, I know that you can do it, or are you just wanting some help today, and that's fine. And then the frustration for me, sometimes it's, it can be tired, hungry, whatever. And it's just like, oh, do you need some help? Do you want to try it a different way? And just really being gentle about guiding them that way.
I think it's really interesting. When I first went to my Montessori play group class with my son, he's now 18, but I went when he was 1.5 years old. I saw all the other children putting on their shoes by themselves. And I thought, oh, Oliver has to be able to put on his shoes by himself. He's not doing that. And so I need to make him be independent. So I went the other extreme. I got a low chair, and then he had to do it all by himself. And there was none of this do as little as possible to help them and as much as necessary. I do as little but as much as necessary, so that they don't feel like we're pushing them. Because they do think they pick up that energy, like, oh, my child's meant to be being independent, and maybe it feels a little forced. And on the other hand, you don't want to, you're trying to, like Jean-Marie says, find that balance between encouraging them, giving them just enough help, but not taking over every time. And so sometimes I start to help them, like, oh, I'll hold your shoe open for you. I'm just going to step back and see how you're getting it now. Oh, look, you managed the next bit all by yourself. So they almost hear a yes as well. Yes, I'll help you open up the shoe, and then they take over for the rest of it. So I think there's a few good tips out there that should help just change that dynamic a little bit as well.
Yes.
And I think it's for everyone to hear, because I think we do get inspired a lot by the ideas, and then we go too far, too quickly.
And to me, it's being vigilant of what our expectations are. Like that you cannot expect them to do the same thing every day. Like if they've been successful with one thing one day, it doesn't mean that they're going to be successful over and over again. We have our moods. I remember well in our training about just seeing the child as a brand new child each and every day. Like really being there to be mindful, to just be present of how they show up that day in that moment is really important.
And so the second part of the question is, we also taught him to ask for hugs if he needs them. But now he uses them when he doesn't want to do stuff, such as brushing his teeth or getting dressed. He cries, asks for hugs, and going from dad to mum, and it's getting very tricky to deal with. And I actually can picture this almost. So I can understand how that dynamic develops quite easily.
So that's an interesting one. My first initial, is like, okay, let's have one hug before, brushing the teeth. But then I wouldn't want to limit hugs. Like, I want to give an unlimited amount of hugs. So, how would you deal with that one?
Yeah, I think it's also about filling his bucket and being clear, like, oh yeah, let's clean our teeth, and then there'll be lots of times for hugs. So I might actually put the thing first, so that you still get done, and then the hug comes at the end. Because also then once mum's had a hug, and then he wants a hug from dad, and it's just kind of a form of procrastination. So it's also looking for clarity in what's the limit here and how much can I push this, and at the same time saying, I want to fill your bucket. And so just being clear on that the hugs are definitely coming as soon as you've I'm not bribing him or anything like this. You have to be really careful with how it's worded.
That's what I was going to say, because it sounds like it's almost like this conditional, this condition, you can have a hug if you do something. So
it's more like when we're finished, we'll have a hug. So it's the same in my classes, for example. Often a child reaches out to grab another cracker, and I say, yes, you can have another one when you finish that one. I'm not saying I'm I'm not trying to bribe them, but I'm just
Right.
clear when they'll get the next one. And it's no different between a cracker and a hug, just that emotionally it feels different.
Yeah, no, very good point.
Great. Okay. There's a question here from Anna. Our nearly 4-year-old is not allowed to play with phones, tablets, and we don't watch TV at home. But during holidays, long flights, and family visits, people can't help but turn on the TV and show him videos on their phones and tablets. He then acts like a junkie the following days and insists we let him watch more cartoons. He's a good eater, but if a restaurant has a TV on, he barely touches his food. And last September, when he started at a new preschool where he's been hanging out with the kids that watch TV, dressed with characters' clothes, and basically play they're killing each other all the time. And so her wish is to incorporate screen time in our home with moderation so he can smoothly transition between our world and the real world. I'd love to hear some tips on educational content, apps, music, nature and science channels for kids, as well as plans, ideas on how to evolve over the years. Which is a great question. There's a second part to this one, but we'll cover this one first. There's a really great book called Toxic Childhood. Have you read that one?
I have not. Toxic Childhood? No, I have not.
Yeah, so it's the subtitle is how the world is damaging our children and what we can do about it. And it's actually already 10 years old, so it doesn't cover iPads as such, but it covers TV. And I really like her approach to technology, which is kind of to be realistic, a bit what Anna wants. So she doesn't want to be the TV-free family that doesn't have any exposure. And that's basically what this lady says, is that if you don't give them any exposure to media, then they won't know what kind of things that other children are talking about. But you can make then mindful choices, and it's not unlimited amount of time, but you allow whatever time you're comfortable with, and then it's on chosen programs or chosen, however you want to do it. Because I think the danger is these days is you give your kid an iPhone for a couple of minutes while you're in the cafe, and then another couple of minutes here, and all of a sudden your screen time is over an hour, and you wouldn't want that. And under 3, they say that you really don't need, any screen time at all. So this is a child over 4. They're wanting to do it in a mindful way. So this is what we did when our children got a bit older, is we limited it, and it builds up to 30 minutes a day. But it was really 30 minutes a day right through primary school, well into high school even. So they started using phones and things from 12. And so I don't think you need it before that if you can. It depends what your situation is. Our children needed a mobile phone when they started cycling to school by themselves so they could contact us. So I'm just giving you some examples of how we did it. I'd love people to drop in the chat box any of these age-appropriate programs that you have found useful, because that's something that I found really important. Was I don't want my child to be watching the ones where they're shooting each other, but there are some sweet, like Dora the Explorer, where they're trying to follow a little scavenger hunt. They're learning some Spanish counting. If I was going to show them any TV, I would do something like this. Where the child feels involved. They're always being asked questions. But music channels, nature channels and science channels, if anyone's got any suggestions. Can you hear me?
Hello? Hello, I'm back.
To talk about it if something does come up. So also keep that in mind. It just says iPhone, we don't use screens. Yeah. So, and I also was really mindful to have the TV off during the day, because I think nowadays with so much technology, you have your phone in your hand all day, that's a screen. And your child is very interested by why you're always on your screen. So it's really mindful to have a place where you put your phone away when you don't need it, and maybe just limit all the notifications that come up so that it will ding when you have a message, as opposed to Instagram notification and a Facebook notification and all the other notifications that pop up on our phones. I find that really useful. And sometimes I just also hide my phone in my room so I don't get distracted, because basically you can tell your children all about why screens aren't important, but you also need to model that behavior. It's really super important that we are the models for our children in this technological age and how you manage it. And even with my teenagers, I say, oh, I'm going to have my Instagram break now, rather than just sitting and scrolling and scrolling. And they see that I'm on the Instagram for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I turn off my phone again and put it away. So I like it to relax. I take it off my phone sometimes on the weekend. I took it off for 2.5 weeks over Christmas, and they see me also, you know, decompressing from social media. And that's how it would happen maybe as they get older, Anna. What I did find is that when they got to be teenagers, they wanted to be on social media, to be with other people. And unless you want them to go around your back and open up the accounts anyway, then it's something to discuss with them, which ones are going to be okay, so that you can also provide them guidance with how to use this technology in a safe way. So it's actually better, I think, to have an open relationship with your child so that you can be able to educate them. Otherwise, they may go behind your back, and then you'll find that you have more problems because there's a lack of honesty and openness that's coming up. What I also see with teenagers, if it's useful so you know where you're heading towards, is that children now use WhatsApp chats and social media as their way of interacting. Where we used to sit on the telephone and chat to our friends for a couple of hours, they're using these social media platforms to communicate with each other. So it's that balance, and that's why I like this book, Toxic Childhood, by Sue Palmer, because she's very practical. This is the life that we are in, and how we're going to manage it in a way that doesn't take over your family. Okay. Okay. Oh yeah, Daniel Tiger. Our 2 kids watch 1 episode of Daniel Tiger every morning so that parents can shower and dress. Kids are 18 months and 3. Do you think that's too much, too young, too much, detrimental? It's only screen time all day. Okay, so under 3, I don't think they need any screen time, but it's a very personal decision. If you feel like it's not affecting their behavior, Daniel Tiger is a show that I've heard really good things about, but I haven't personally seen myself, and it teaches children about emotional intelligence. So again, you're being wise about what you're exposing them to, and I can't tell everyone what's right for their family. But the Montessori approach is to stick with a lot of hands-on learning, concrete learning, and you can't get that from a screen or a TV. Even if people say you can learn a language, you know, this is also like learn a language from TV. It's mostly from a personal relationship that they're going to pick up language.
So I have a little bit of, I think I would be a little bit more, I guess, radical than you on this topic, in that I don't feel there's any screen necessary really until, you know, at least like 6 years of age. I just feel so strongly about the importance of the absorbent mind and letting all of that just come to fruition on its own. Screen time for me, you know, in the morning is really kind of setting them up for, you know, kind of being a little bit spaced out right in the morning. Like it's a wonderful babysitter, and don't get me wrong, I understand. But I'm just wanting people to be vigilant on the why using it. You know, for me, like if you're going to share, do a screen time, do it with them. Like be there together to talk about what's going on, to be able to have a conversation, to be able to see things. And I would definitely limit that time. I would, you know, use it as a tool to interaction, as opposed to a tool to you know, keep them quiet. So that is for me and for us. I mean, this is very personal. I had no television in my home until much later. My daughter got a phone when she went off to high school, and that's when I got my first phone at the same time as she did. And we do have a television, but it's actually in a closed cupboard. So we have to go open it and, you know, turn it on and be very mindful about it. So to me, it is such a personal thing. And I don't believe in the fact that, well, it's our world today, we have to, you know, partake, because I believe that when our children are older, it will be a whole other different tools that they will have, and they will, you know, learn them then as well. So that's just my
I think
thing.
there's a lot of crossover there. I'm not sure if you cut out like while I was saying the initial thing, but definitely, yeah, sitting next to your child as you're doing screen time is very useful. But you're right, it can put your brain into a different brain state. So definitely something to think about how you're using it.
Yeah.
The second part of the question is, I'd also appreciate if you could comment on the related topics below and how to go about it with the age group 3 to 6 in mind, the role of violence in children's play, and childhood consumerism.
So I don't quite understand the question.
So the role of violence in children's play would be children in a playground and pretending to use guns and things like this. That would be violence. And childhood consumerism would be like, I think what she means is like if a Spider-Man suit and Spider-Man sheets and all the merchandising that come along with these characters that it sounds like her child's being exposed to in the school environment.
So, I mean, for me, that's why I was super vigilant to not like, there's somebody who's not muted, hold on. That's why I was super vigilant about what I expose them to, because I honestly feel that if they're playing violent game, it's because they were exposed to, violent games by either television, the media, or other children who are watching the media. When it's pretend play, I'm sad to see it, but it is a reality. If children are watching the news and things like that, and if you've ever read Simplicity Parenting by Kim John Payne, who talks a lot about how, when we're watching the news and how that affects them, and then yes, they might role play all of that. I don't know. I again, this is kind of like what I tell families is, you choose what you put in your refrigerator. You choose the food you put on the table. You can also choose what you expose your children to in media wise, in, going along with the Spider-Man things and everything. Like, you don't have to consume it. So again, it's a personal choice.
Yeah, and I think it's very difficult because it doesn't sound like Anna's the one giving this information.
Right.
So they're being vigilant at home, but they're being exposed still by kids who are watching it. And that is difficult to manage because you can't control. It's a part of letting go of our children. They're going to be exposed to things that aren't in our control. So how can we then educate them? So I always was mindful of who my children were playing with, but you also can't stop your children choosing their friends.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so what I also realized is that they're with me most of the time, and the values that I hold up and how we treat each other. And I can discuss these things with them as well. That game that you were playing, and it was about this, and is this a respectful way to treat each other? So again, you can talk about it, but you keep modeling how we talk about other people. And I don't think you can stop a child pretending that their fingers are a gun, but I would never bring a weapon into the house because it's basically the absorbent mind, what you're choosing to put on the plate as well.
Yeah.
Childhood consumerism is the same thing. I really try and limit it. Even I was really fussy about Thomas the Tank Engine for some reason. I just wanted the IKEA train. I didn't need to have, buy into this marketing thing that the children want more and more. Jean Marie's taking a photo. Hi.
I'm putting it on Instagram so people can join us.
So hopefully that's helpful, Anna. Just keep being mindful of the choices you're making, and you can just keep talking about what happens when things aren't as you would hope and what you could hope for, and hope that all your beautiful, lovely, positive parenting will pay off. Mariana says, hi, hello. And we've got some great questions coming in. I'll definitely get to the questions in the chat box as well. I will just finish first the ones that have come in before the show, and then we'll get on to the ones in the chat. So if you have any questions coming up, feel free. And now from Anka, she's asking, I have some questions regarding Montessori homeschooling. Do you have any training to recommend for homeschoolers? Any other resources? I'm an avid reader, so any book recommendations are appreciated too. I understand that mentoring with a Montessori trainer would be highly recommended also. Do you know how often this should normally be? Maybe more often in the beginning and less afterwards. The children are 3.5 years old and 15 months, so it's about the older one, the 3.5-year-old. Jean-Marie, do you have any experience with homeschooling?
I don't, but I have more and more actually Montessori trained friends who are deciding to homeschool. I have two who were in the classroom, one last year, and she has been homeschooling her two daughters this year. I have another one who will be homeschooling within a few weeks. So I think there's definitely, a movement towards that. There are, quite a few people, for example, that I follow on Instagram who are homeschoolers or who do Montessori co-ops and such. But training wise, I don't know. And I don't, Aubrey actually from, what is it? Childhood of the Redwoods. She does a homeschooling training and things like that. So there are some good ones. I think just like any schools, you need to do your research so that you're being mentored by a person who has good knowledge, who has experience, and all of that, which is to me very important. But there's a lot of wonderful resources out there. So yes.
Yeah, I also don't have any experience, but I do know that Carrots Are Orange, Marnie also runs a homeschooling course. And these people who have got a trained Aubrey Hargis from Child of the Redwoods who could then help you and assist you. And you're right, like at first you might need more assistance in how you're going to set up your Montessori homeschooling, and then maybe just set up check-ins would probably be a realistic way to manage it. But I don't have any book recommendations. I don't know of any Montessori homeschooling books. There's one by David Getman that's just about the presentations that you can do with your child, but actually I'm not sure how many materials would be the best for a Montessori homeschool. But what I do know is that it works often best to have a homeschool room where you go and do a 3-hour work cycle, and then the rest of the time you're living in a Montessori way, of course, doing practical life, movement, art, exploration, but the materials aren't out 24/7 because then they kind of get bored with them. They don't treat them as beautifully. And so I think that would be also something to keep in mind as you're setting up your space. Is there somewhere that you can actually close the door of, or how could you improvise something like that?
That, and I would highly recommend too, is kind of, doing it with other families, because, some things might get a little expensive or such. And if you can have more of a co-op, and then the children are also getting, kind of being able to work together and things like that. So I think there's plenty of different ways of going about it. You just have to find what works for you, for sure.
Okay.
And your child.
Of course. And Diane asks, I'm very interested in the subject of sleeping the Montessori way, but I find it difficult to put into practice. How does the baby go play in his room when it's pitch black? My son, 15 months, sleeps on a floor bed, but as soon as he wakes up, he calls us. When it's time for nap, if we don't put him to sleep, he'll go to the back of the door and call out to us to come. I guess my question is, how do you teach a kid to go to bed on his own when he's tired?
How do you teach a child to go to bed on his own? I think to me, it's just, being vigilant, like the whole observation of being vigilant as to seeing the rhythm and kind of catching it a little bit before it's time for us to go lie down, or, it's sleep time, or, you're feeling sleepy, whatever your language is, but really have it as much as possible, a systematic routine, and being careful, not to be putting them to sleep, like rocking them to sleep, nursing them to sleep, everything, because then they're learning that habit of they need you to fall asleep. So, learning to sleep on your own is like a whole process, because as babies, we tend to feel so adamant about making sure our child is sleeping that we'll do anything to help them get to sleep. And then, sometimes that practice or that habit is going to stay. So sometimes it's a matter of weaning off that practice of being the crutch for them to fall asleep. And then it's just, really letting them know. I kind of like the routine chart that we talked about earlier. I like to create sometimes a little sleep book. So it's really more of a little book that you're going to be reading with them of what are the expectations, like what is our routine for us to go to sleep, and then what is kind of the wake up routine? Like, when do we wake up? So it could be more, when there's light in the room. So you take a picture of, when the sun has come up, or things like that. And that is something that you read to them every night. So again, there's that repetition and there's that expectation, and they know what is expected of them. It's super, super helpful for us as well, because it reminds us of what we have set as the expectation. And it's great if you have a babysitter, or sorry, I'm trying to mute. If you have a babysitter or somebody else that is taking care of, that nighttime routine.
Yeah, and I think just quickly to cover the Montessori floor bed, the idea is this child sleeps on the floor even from birth, so that they get used to, instead of having bars, very convenient, having a cot which contains them. The Montessori approach is that their child can be independent. They can get in and out of their bed when they're tired. When they wake up, they don't need to call out to us. They instead go and play with some of the materials. So when you say that when he wakes up, he calls out to you, I guess he's just saying, okay, now I want my company. And he's not the type of child that's going to go and play by himself for 10 minutes before. Or I would look at what kind of activities do you have available for him to play with when he wakes up in the morning. So choosing some quiet toys, some books, and those kind of things. When I worked in a Montessori nursery, we'd actually often sit next to the children that had trouble staying in their bed, so that they would stay in their bed and still rest. And if they fell asleep, it's still giving them the choice, are you going to sleep or not? Because eating, toileting, and sleeping are really the three things that the child has complete control over. We can't make them sleep, but it's giving them, again, just as little help as they need and as much as necessary. So I'm going to help you, quiet your body, and then scaffolding the skills just like you would anything else. So a child who's learning to cut, first I hold the piece of paper and they snip, and then gradually they get the coordination to hold two pieces. Well, I know sleeping's volatile, it has a lot of motion around it, but again, same kind of principle is like, how much little, definitely if I'm rocking the baby, they're going to look to me to rock. But if I sit next to the baby, put my hand on the baby, that might be for week 1. Week 2 might be that I'm sitting next to them and reading my book. Then week 3 might be me moving my chair close to the door. Week 4, I'm outside the door. So again, scaffolding the skills in a very gentle way that feels good for you. So it's difficult. I'm not sure how comfortable I would feel if my child was getting up and playing in the middle of the night. That never happened with my children when they were able to get out of their bed. So I do know some children who get up and manage to play even in the dark. So maybe there's a little bit of light coming through onto the door, or they have very good night vision. They play for a bit and they go back to their bed. But I think most children would sleep in the night. So hopefully that gives you a few tips how you could help them establish a really beautiful bedtime routine, like Jean-Marie was saying, as well as giving them just as little help as they need, but as much as is necessary.
Yes, perfect.
So over in the chat box, Pat has a question. I have a question about my student in the classroom. There are 2, and one of them in the phase of hitting, grabbing, and pinching. She'll do it if she feels upset, irritated, or even just to do it out of nowhere. I've tried to let her know that I understand when she's upset and give her some alternatives, but it's getting harder when she just did it out of nowhere and keeps leaving a mark on her friend's body. What can I do to calm myself and make sure everyone's safe while in my care? And when it happens 10 times a day, I feel bad and feel like what I have done is wrong. And yeah. Pata, my heart goes out to you. It is very, very difficult because you do feel responsible for the care of the children in your space. I think I've shared before a really useful article on biting, which I can share because it's the same kind of principles, and it's really about observation, which is looking at your environment. So some children, for example, feel cornered, so it's not even, it seems to come out of nowhere, but they're feeling cornered. And so they might pinch to say, actually, I'm feeling like you're in my space. Can you drop in the chat box, Pata, how old the kids are as well? Because often it also happens around the time when they're not able to communicate in long sentences. Let's see, a message came in, 2 years, exactly. Yeah, so 2 years, I see that the biting and hitting and grabbing comes around that time, because they might even try one time, like my turn, and then the second time, I don't have the patience, so I'm just going to push you, or I'm going to bite you, or I'm going to pinch you. And they're seeing the cause and effect and getting a reaction. So in my classroom, when there's an incident, what I try and do is I address both children, because the child who is hurt needs some assistance, but also the child who pinches also is missing a need. You know, we don't want to make and shame them because they haven't had the skills to control themselves. That's something that they're going to build. So I really love Pamela Green, and she was talking about how she often sits down low in situations where she's kind of being a bodyguard in a very calm, gentle way, not feeding the information, like not adding energy, like, oh no, when's she going to pinch net? And I know it's very difficult. You've got other children in your space as well. But if you notice, like writing down what times it happens, is it when she's tired, hungry, and other things? The observation is really, really important. And I'll try and find this article because I think it's really nice to remind us of all the other things that have been going on. Another chance to look at our environment. Is it too stimulating? Is she highly sensitive? Because all these things could be triggering her, which makes it seem like it's out of the blue. We even had one child who was doing biting because of her eyesight. And when their eyes got checked and got glasses, all of this difficult behavior helped, because you can't actually tell. Like, it would feel really intimidating if someone comes close to you in your thing, but you can't focus quite quickly enough.
Yes, and I would also I like reminding the children what your job is. Like, it's my job to keep everybody safe, and I can't let you, bite or scratch or whatever. So that they really see that you're there to keep everybody safe. You're there to love everybody and to keep everybody safe, and to just, be that loving presence to say, I can't let that happen.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And the other thing that we didn't talk about is actually like how to deal with it. So we're both basically going to try and help both children calm down, because, and then once they've calmed down, rather than forcing them to apologize, I like to get the child to help make amends. Like, oh, your friend is really sad. I can see that they've got something on there. Let's go and find, would you like to find a plaster or a wet cloth to put on your friend's arm? So we're showing them how it's restorative justice. How can I make it up to someone who I've hurt? And then over time, you might find that other people in the class will say, I know what we'll do that will help our friend. And, they run over and get a tissue, and it can be really, really beautiful. So I think of it also not as in a bad thing, like you're doing bad by the children, but actually I can teach them something about how they can be friendly to not only the friend that's been hurt, but the friend who felt so bad that they pinched someone. And it could be really beautiful learning environment. So Patara, I hope that helps. Dawn has a question. Can you give words of wisdom to help aid a non-trained Montessori administrator when dealing with a 22-month-old biting 22 times in 4 months? So again, I'd apply most of the same things.
And as an administrator, I'm assuming that they're not in the classroom and they're having to deal with the parents.
Okay, yes.
So this is very important to, be sharing articles, like the article that Simone will be sharing with us, kind of sharing things that explain that this is actually a very normal, part of the way that our young children communicate, especially when they're in this pre-verbal stage where they know they have things to say and they just can't say it and they just want to bite. And so it's, to really, that we're not labeling children like they're not bad. It's not, they're a biter as if it was something terrible. It's just every child has a different way of expressing that frustration. So really important to have very good communication so that you can really help both parents. So the parents of the child who is biting and the parent of the children who are being bit. Because sometimes that can get very, there can be misunderstanding, and then they how can you let my child be bit, and so on and so forth. So really important to have a very loving, compassionate communication with those parents, and getting, as much support for the child who is biting, and to try to as much as possible to be vigilant and observant so it doesn't happen as often.
Lovely. And then we have a question from Mariana, and she says that my 5-year-old told me she doesn't want to go to music class because she has to do what the teacher tells her, and she wants to do what she wants. I see a small rebel and wonder if this will make her life difficult, not only mine. She goes to a Montessori kindergarten and will probably continue to a Montessori school. We already have a lot of trouble asking her to do things, how to keep calm, how to guide her. My Montessori kid is a rebel and will only do what she wants.
Yahoo, love rebels.
Oh, you're sweet.
Strong-willed children are children who have leadership qualities, who have qualities that are going to serve them well. It's true that it's hard right now when they're, younger and smaller than you and have this strong will, but it is, to be respected and to be guided. It's not a bad thing. But so for the music teacher, if the child is in a Montessori environment and is able to freely choose her activities, and then goes to a class where she's being told how to do things, I could understand where she might be rebelling, because that's not what she prefers doing. So, is this music class indispensable? Do you, can you hold it off for a couple of years? I don't know. Those are things that you have to decide. Like for me, is it something that she's really wanting to do, and taking it from there. And then the rest is, always, like we've always talked with Simone, is about giving them choices, of giving them, being firm and kind at the same time, and giving them choices that you're 100% okay with. And letting them have that initiation of taking control. I mean, it sounds like she's has a good head on her shoulder and knows what she wants. And so it's just about helping that muscle of the will being developed by giving her choices.
Yeah, and I think that it is a difficult age where you can't necessarily make them sit still in a music class. So I would, like Jean-Marie says, this one might be non-negotiable, but you also have to be careful that you don't start an activity and then she says, I don't like it, and then you give up, because then you're also showing them that you don't stick at things. So I know that there's a fine balance, but if it's not really her thing, I think it would be okay to say, it's not really working out. I've noticed that you're really not enjoying the class. It doesn't seem like that it follows your rhythm. Let's put that on pause right now and come back and review it in a while. That would be something that I would do with the external classes. If she is in a Montessori kindergarten, then they will have the tools to deal with, when she needs to come and have lunch with the other children. They'll find ways for her to work with them. We often talk about working with rather than doing to in Montessori. And this language is talked about by Alfie Kohn. If you look at Unconditional Parenting, his book, it talks about how can we find ways, particularly for these strong-willed children, to find that they feel involved in what's going on in their lives. They're basically saying, I don't like this. And then there's times when you're going to say, and we're leaving the house because we need to be blah, 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 and how you can do that. But I want to do this, like a bit like Jean-Marie says, like it's my job to keep everyone safe, and it's my job to make sure that we're on time. So like, how can we help each other right now? And building this in, that you're basically a team. You're the one that's the guide, you're in charge, but you can get her involved as much as possible. I think that would be, with these strong-willed children, the best, like Jean-Marie says, with choices, really asking for input on things that is appropriate, and showing her sometimes that the answer isn't always yes either, and that can be difficult. She will maybe have a big explosion and you comfort her and say, it's really hard to see you having a hard time. You really wanted XXX and that wasn't possible. And I'm trying to think, isn't there a book, The Strong-Willed Child?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know it off the top of my head. But for me, I mean, strong will is it's a term that's used like so
negatively. Actually, this label is really important.
Yeah, and to me, that I always say, like when families, call me and I have a strong-willed child, as if it was like some terrible thing. I'm like, hooray, that's wonderful. They won't let themselves be walked all over, and it's, they have a strong personality and they're going to be able to do great things. It's a leadership quality and so forth. So it's really sometimes like that mindset around, these labels that we're putting. It's like, this is your child's character. This is the child that you have been gifted, who has this personality. It's like, how can I help her fulfill her full potential with the personality that she's acquired. So I think to me that's also how we perceive, and oftentimes going back to what we talked at the beginning of the show, is what is that like triggering in you? Like why is that an issue if she's a rebel or not? To me that's like a quality. Like I have a daughter who I consider to be pretty much of a rebel. She's, at 17, she went off, she lives in Scotland, she's happy as can be. And she's always been like super independent. And I've just had to learn to navigate life with her and give her the tools to be able to adapt to her time, place and culture with her personality. And I think that that's just our role as parents. So not labeling them in a negative way, if at all possible.
Yeah, Mariana wrote in the chat box that she's crying, and thank you very much. Thanks. I think that, that label of rebel, if you can drop that and come to a much more positive way of thinking about it, I think that's also a big mindset shift. And I think this actually is a really beautiful place to end the call, because we started the call with how do you live Montessori, and it's a mindset. It's like, how am I going to accept my child for who they are and guide them in the most beautiful way to let them be the person they're going to be? Because otherwise, if you try to put your child into a box that they have to do this, they're going to try and fight their way out. If they're that type of child, or their beautiful creativity will be, squashed and stomped on. So I think this has been really fun to reconnect with you all in the new year. You're welcome to come back and watch this. As the child who was not. Oh,
you broke up there for a second.
Okay, so Dawn's comment was that she wants to help change the biting policy. As the child who was not and broke skin, they get sent home and the biter stays at school. So she'd love other policies to show administrators. So I'm not sure if anyone has any biting policies, but it definitely would be something worth looking into.
Yeah, and I would, if you are on Facebook, I would tag Pamela Green. She seems to have a lot of great information, or we can see will you be sharing the article as well that you mentioned, Simone, on biters? Because I think that would be very helpful. But yes, thank you all for being here. It was a pleasure. And how does we tried on a Saturday, and it seemed to be working quite well because we had quite a few people live. So thank you for being here. And the replay will be uploaded to YouTube later this afternoon for you to watch it or share it.
And one thing before you go, I am going to be traveling to the US in March. So if you want to find out if I'm coming nearby you guys, I'm going to put a link in the replay email that comes up so that you can go on my newsletter list, and I'll keep you updated in the coming weeks. So all of that information is going on, as well as people who want to pre-order the book. We're going to put together pre-order bonuses, which starts the beginning of Feb. So I'll add that. Any other links to add, Jean-Marie, for you?
Yes, actually, thank you for reminding me, because I have just opened the doors to my Montessori parenting membership community that is open right now, and I will share the link with Simone. But this is an ongoing, more intimate group where I share monthly topics, and then I do a live Zoom call with everybody to answer their questions directly, and just a lot of resources, and it's a wonderful group of like-minded parents. So I would love to welcome you there. It is called the Montessori Parenting Membership Community, and the link will be shared with all of you.
Okay, well, thank you everyone so much for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.